Hey, George, you're a scientist.
I'm a chemist, yes.
Right, you're a scientist. So I've been complaining to you a lot over the last little while about the heat.
Full stop.
Well,
That's
yes.
the end of that.
Yeah, I've been complaining to you a lot, period. Yeah. New sentence. Sometimes it's been about the heat. But now, where I live, and hopefully where you live, actually, because we're in kind of different climates, but it's starting to cool off. Right?
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank God. But we have like a bunch of like summer toys and like summery furniture and crap, like stuff that's just outdoors when the weather's nice that you have to then like schlep inside when it's going to be below freezing outside because things will get ruined, right? And some of it is like, oh, it can't get wet, right? It's going to get snow all over it and that'll ruin it. But some things just like get ruined by the cold. Like they get cold and then like they break or they get weird. And it made me kind of wonder, like, well, this thing sat out in the blazing sun and it like didn't just break and get stupid, but like cold can make things like brittle and break, and like especially kids' toys and like summery, like lawn chair furniture and stuff. Like, so why cold? Why cold ruin things?
It's a very good question. And darn it, Lions, I'm a chemist, not a materials engineer. But with my very limited knowledge and very limited expertise, I will attempt to opine to this. So, and the interesting thing about this one is when we actually set it up, I think we have talked about all of these concepts individually in other episodes. So realistically, most of this I'm going to throw to you.
This is going to be like a midterm.
Yeah, exactly. And it is cumulative. Side note, I was I've been taking some classes, and this was a couple semesters ago. One of the professors said the final exam will be cumulative. There is no way for us to teach this course where the final exam isn't cumulative. And I'm like, you're teaching like 4 distinct concepts. The way you do that is by not putting the first concept on the final exam. Like, they're 4 individual things, So,
yeah, I actually distinctly remember taking it was called a baby bio. It was like the throwaway science course you could take if your major didn't have like science requirements. And it was taught not only in 4 distinct sections, which meant there was no cumulative final because each section had nothing to do with the other sections, but they didn't even allow like the human being to be the same. So like section 1 was taught by like this TA, and then that TA left and we never saw them again.
Never seen or heard from again.
Yeah. So that was like the most aggressive, there will be no cumulative final course I remember.
Yes, where it's like a double blind, where it's like there can be no final cumulative. Yes, excellent. So why do things get more brittle as they get colder? Well, let us first start with the question, what is heat?
It is the amount of kinetic energy in a system.
Bam! Man, yes, that is the textbook definition. Well done.
I'm really screwing myself by inviting you to this coffee shop earlier in the morning than we usually do these.
Absolutely, yes. So heat is the measure of the kinetic energy in the system, right? So if you've got something that's solid, right, and so typically speaking, as Mr. Freeze so elegantly said in our friend's favorite Batman movie, everything freezes, right? So when something
he did say that in that guy's favorite Batman movie.
Yeah, absolutely, in his favorite Batman movie. And the sad thing is that guy doesn't listen to these shows and know that we're making fun of him. Anyways, so
but we know.
But basically, when something's solid, right, is all of the pieces are as close together as they can reasonably be, right? And then as you pour more kinetic energy into the system, they start vibing a little bit, and then they start to be able to move smoothly around one another, all water-like, because they're a liquid. And then, if they get too rowdy and excited, they start to bounce off each other like they're like an aha video, And and so then they reach the gaseous state, right? So all of that is true of heat and matter, right? So then we need to ask the next question: what is brittle?
Ooh, so when
scientifically defined as best you can.
Yeah, when I think of brittle, I think of something that is strong but can like snap, right? So like a twig, like a dry twig, right, is like it's sturdy. But then when it breaks like catastrophically, right? It doesn't bend. It's not supple or pliant. It like snaps. Or like a ginger snap cookie, right? It has zero give and then when it fails catastrophically and like snaps into two separate pieces. So I would say like not pliant, not supple.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is a very, very good definition, worthy of Webster's. Specifically, scientifically, there is a formula for determining brittleness, and it is, and when I say it, you're going to be a little frustrated because I remember you liking it when I said it the first time. It is grunt over grown.
Oh yeah.
So it is the amount of work that you put into deforming it to how much it deforms. So with things that are brittle, basically, if you look at the graph, it's like force going in is like like basically continues to go up, and then the amount of deformation is near zero until it just slams off the graph because it goes to 100% because it breaks, right? So whereas things that are pliant, they if you push on them, they
more
will,
like a curve.
Yeah, they will give and then a lot of times return to their original shape. Sometimes they won't, and they will actually deform, but both of them are less brittle, right? So with those two pieces of information, I'm interested if you because it's a little bit of a leap, but why do things get more brittle as they get colder?
Well, the incredible shoulder motions you make whenever you talk about like adding more kinetic energy into a system, right? So that is the one failing of our conversations here is that people don't get to see some of your body language. So you have I'm imagining like you have two atoms in a system, right? If they are able to kind of freely move around each other, if I zoom that out to the macro scale, that's the bending and the being pliant, right? Whereas if they are in a rigid formation, then when that rigid formation breaks between two atoms, if you scaled that up to the macro, then that's the ginger snap breaking, right? That's the block of ice being chipped.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, you got it. And the quick way to say it is more kinetic energy gives the system more ways to relieve stress. So basically,
because the system is under force, and what is it doing with that? Bending is a way to distribute that force.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a way to relieve the stress that you're placing on the system. And if things are warmer, right, then those molecules can actually physically move around one another to help relieve that stress. So when you're pushing it, they're able to move past each other, to help relieve some of that stress. As it gets colder and colder and colder, that's no longer an option. So as you're putting force into the system, they're like, screw it, I'm out. And then they just blam and they break apart, right? Because they can't just subtly move past each other. And it is interesting because depending on the physical characteristics of the system determines where and how it becomes more brittle, in its ways to relieve stress, which is actually why, one of the cool things I think of like why salts are so brittle is if you have like a chunk of salt is because they're arranged with like positive, negative charge, which is why you have to pour so much energy into it to get it to freely move because those charges are where they want to be.
Right.
And then, but if you hit it with a hammer, you misalign those charges and then they just kind of fly apart, which is why they tend to remain brittle for very high temperatures.
That suggests, this may be like super wrong, but is there like an order to the like which forces would be the more dominant one? So like kinetic energy is less like powerful to act on the system than like the intermolecular forces, right?
Yes. So there's not a strict hierarchy. So basically, what you and I'm gonna screw this up a little bit because the number one thing, the number one driving force in any chemical or I believe physical change is entropy. So as long as the entropy of the universe is increasing, then it favors things going in that direction, so you can sometimes get a decrease of entropy in a system because you've increased the entropy in the surroundings, so but the universe, the system and surroundings must move towards entropy. That being said, is that basically most of what we would describe as like physical or chemical changes, you can kind of look at, especially physical changes, you can look at it and basically kind of say like, oh, what are the intermolecular forces doing? How strong are they? And based off of the strength of the intermolecular forces and how the compound like just physically interacts with itself, you can then determine like what or estimate or guess at what its physical properties will be. So for example, if you take water, right, when water freezes, part of the reason why it becomes super brittle super quickly is because of the way the hydrogen and oxygen atoms all line up, in this kind of like that crystal lattice structure,
right?
Which then if you hit it, it flies apart just like a salt would. So, and then if you take a plastic, which may actually have similar brittleness, the reason why it's brittle is because the molecule is so long that they entangle with themselves. And so even though each individual atom's intermolecular force is significantly lower, the overall intermolecular forces, because the atom is or the molecule is so big, can cause these kind of entanglements, which gives it fewer options to relieve stress.
So is that you would, if you had something that was like gooey and viscous, even as that got very cold, that would be less brittle than something that has like a perfect like crystalline structure, because that has like obvious break points, whereas this thing is like all over itself.
Yeah, it's more a function of how cold does it need to get before it becomes more and more brittle. So like
sure,
everything.
yeah, I guess I meant under the same conditions. So it's freezing outside, literally freezing outside, like it's 0 degrees Celsius outside.
Yeah.
So like this material, this water is now very brittle because it became crystalline ice, whereas like this Nickelodeon GAC sponsored by Nickelodeon is not brittle because it's still like kind of a viscous goop. But if it got cold enough, it would become like a brittle thing that I could smash with a hammer.
Yes, and so to use exactly, and to continue with the analogy, right, is that basically depending on the intermolecular forces of the plastic, it could also be frozen or in its glass state at the same temperature, or even at very higher temperatures, as we can see from all of the plastic around us right now. I
hate thinking about those things as being frozen. I understand. I understand they're in their glass state, which is like basically kind of the same thing, but like there's plastic around me all over right now, and it's like room temperature in the room we're in. So.
Yep. No, it really is fascinating because my kids have started to ask more and more sciencey questions, and they'll say like, well, like how fast they'd be like, what's the fastest that any human being can move? And I was like, well, it's around this speed. And they're like, oh, but what if they were on a train? I'm like, oh, are we removing an objective reference point? Because in that case, you're moving 3,000 miles an hour circling around the sun, which is hurtling through space. I mean, like, it's all weird and relative. Or they at one point said like, oh, that's a really long time. And I was like, well, it depends on the time scale you're talking about, right? Because they're like, oh, man, that took like a year. Nothing takes longer than that. I'm like, well, I mean, the Earth's a couple billion years old, but, like, it's whatever. But yeah, it is all relative. So basically and this is where I am getting my cumulative final tested because I took that polymers class. I'm seeing how much of it I can remember off the top of my head. But basically is that the greater the intermolecular forces, the more likely it is to be in a solid state at a higher temperature. So the stronger the molecules interact with each other, the more they hang on to each other, and you can pour more and more energy into the system, and they'll stay in a lattice. And then once they get enough energy, they'll start to move freely around each other and eventually go into a gas. But it's harder and harder the stronger the intermolecular forces between the molecules.
All right, this does remind me of some other autumn Huga science questions I think I might want to ask you about.